I'm just in touch with my telephone bill, honestly. When I think of the telecom and the amount of talking connectivity that one has come into, and my own experience, I see that over last many years, how distant actually I've become with people, because I can pick up the phone, I talk to them, and I pay for it. However, I have zero or almost zero connectivity with them in the heart-to-heart space. So I have experienced the relatedness becoming transactional over time. And I'm just linking back to what Ashok used, those three words of violence, oppression, and pain. I've personally experienced really deep oppression, sense of pain, and sense of violence, because I have been partner to this kind of airwave communication, as you mentioned. And over the last 2 years, I have discovered that coming home and living with another set of people, I experienced an opening which embraced touch. Physical touch in terms of simple things as reaching out and touching the person to hug or to, while talking, to be able to touch, which the telecom industry or the phone or my normal communication didn't allow. And I have felt a tremendous amount of healing. And I'm just wondering that this is almost like an Akashvani, that babies, please, kind of last and final call. If you don't wake up now and you continue to be at this verbal diarrhea, you will have no linkages with each other.
My sense is, Kailasam, that you have really dreamt this on behalf of all of us. Really on behalf of, this is a collective dream if ever there was. And my sense is that it's, because I think with, as we work with dreams, one of the things we do is we look at it in many different ways. So for example, just to put it simple, I will look at a dream and say, well, this is one understanding of it. Could I understand it this way? And then I take absolutely the opposite understanding, totally, completely opposite, and I say, and this also could be an understanding of it. And then, in a way, we hold both. And from that place of holding both, in the case of an individual dreamer, then I think we go on to say, well, what feels right? Where is it? Which part of and there you go to the feeling, in a way, the touch that your dream speaks of. Because I don't think we should always understand it or interpret it literally, because we can touch someone, we can touch someone through words also. Words are not always distancing. So now I'll take the completely opposite side, and I'll say, Ashok and they take saying this is an oppressive voice, and out of that, but something emerges, and that is an understanding, and that resonates with many of us here. Supposing I say, well, what you say about Akashvani, there is a very authoritative voice coming from there, and it seems to hold authority. Let me assume for the moment that it holds authority because it has authority. Let me say that this is just at an imaginative level I'm speaking, this is not this thing. My imagination somehow goes in the way of saying, we've been speaking so much of prana. Where is prana? Is this prana speaking, if prana had a voice? And then does it say that if you are, because when we talk, there is also, as Raghu says, an exchange of prana at various levels, here and here. And what the voice seems to be saying, if I look at it from the perspective that this is good authority, right authority, it says, pay money when you talk, pay for talking. And when it says pay for talking, what is it? Patenting is one of the, it's a negative this thing, that also resonated. But what could it look like on the other side when we say, pay for something that you value? That means put your energy, put all of your energy behind what thing, so that it's not just, don't think this prana is just for free. You've really got to engage. And that's how I understand the payment too. So this is just another possibility. The dream does not mean this, but we're holding as many, it can be saying different.
No, in some sense, this the Upanishadic thing is actually saying this. Because that's the whole thing, but when you're silent, then the only way you can deal with things is by experiencing the pranic level of existence. So you actually go through depriving yourself of things that you get dependent upon in some way in order to discover that which you have left behind. Let me then just do a little bit of chanting the way it's supposed to be done. Om yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarottam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi abahu purushakaram shankachakrasidharinam Sahasrashirasam Shvetam Pranamami Patanjalim Atha Yoganushasanam Yogaschitta Vritti Nirodha Tada Drashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam Vritti Sarupyamitharatra Vrittayah Panchatayah Klishtaha Pramana Viparyaya Vikalpa Nidra Smritayah Pratyakshanumanagamav Pramanani Viparyayo Mithya Jnanam Atadrupa Pratishtham Shabda Jnananupati Vastu Shunyo Vikalpaha Abhava Pratyaya Lambana Tamo Vrittir Nidra Anubhuta Vishaya Asampramoshah Smritihi Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tannirodha Tatra Sthitau Yatno Bhyasah Satu Dirghakala Nairantarya Satkara Adara Asevito Dridabhumihi. Okay, I'm not going to go through the whole sutras, it will take a long time. A couple of introductory statements. One of the critical things, or the way I learned the Yoga Sutra, I first learned to chant it by heart. And then meanings are given. And the meanings are given in such a way that it kind of gives you a whole idea. So some of the key words are illustrated. So it's not taught straight away linearly. And then when it is taught, for example, there's a word that appears in the first sutra, second sutra, the third sutra, it might also have an implication somewhere else. So that is also hinted. So you start having, even if I know only this much, whatever I know has a circularity about it, a completeness about it. It's not linear. And since we don't have time, I'm going to do a little bit of this going up and down. So I'm not going to go linear. Because linear actually is taught 2-3 years after you have learned all of this, so many things. Okay? The linearity is only for you to keep it in mind. The second thing is all learning in the yoga tradition assumes Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasitavyam. Shravanam means to listen carefully. Okay? Mananam means to think about it. Nididhyasitavyam means to live by whatever I internalize. I was not allowed to ask questions of my teacher till he thought I was worthy of being listened to and that I knew enough to ask a relevant question. Okay? I asked a question. I asked him, what is prana? And he said, I'll tell you later. I'll tell you next class. So then Deshikachar came to me and said, what have you done to my dad? He's going around reading up all his old books and all that. He was kind of a little concerned. And it made me really, really feel humble. Because here was a person who, because I'd asked him the meaning of a word, went back and read up again before he answered me. He answered me for 3 classes. So I'll just go through the first set of sutras because they're critical to the rest of it. And since I've given the word for word meaning in the text, I don't have to repeat the word for word meaning. Okay? So the first sutra, Atha Yoga Anushasana, is very important because, like I said very briefly yesterday, I think it's page 17 or something like that. Atha means now, and it assumes that you've already been practicing yoga. And therefore, you're now ready to listen to a codified statement of yoga. Yeah? Then it says Yoga Anushasanam. Almost all the other sutras are Jignasa sutras. Jignasa means learning, discussion, debate. Anushasana sutra means you practice. So none of the sutras here are meant for debate. The sutra is meant for practice. Yeah? And all the texts have a kind of a rule of the sutra is in the first 4 or 5 sutras, you should have actually given the gist of the entire thing. Yeah? So the next 3 sutras actually describe the whole of yoga to you in one shot. So what is yoga? Yogaha chitta vritti nirodhaha. Yeah, so I've told you all about chitta vrittis and all that yesterday. So yoga is a process where there is no disturbance at all in perception. There are no secondary disturbances in perception. Chitta vritti actually means the secondary disturbances. It doesn't mean the process of perception itself. I'm saying this because it's sometimes interpreted as though the process of perception itself is stopped and therefore you're in yoga, and therefore people say keep your mind blank and all this kind of crap. Yeah? You perceive, but you perceive without any secondary disturbances. So those are the chitta vrittis. And what we described yesterday are all the secondary disturbances. Yeah? We'll go into details about why they happen and all that as we go along. And when I perceive like this without any secondary disturbances or distortions, intelligence is tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. Yeah? Purusha, the Prakriti, Purusha without any of the disturbances is present. Okay? At other times, vritti sarupyam itaratra. At other times, it is as though I'm only the disturbance. I'm only the disturbance. There is only the disturbance. Okay, therefore there is, in a subtle way, a differentiation between perception of reality, which is full of disturbances and all that, and an experience of actuality. So in Chittavritti Nirodha, there is an experience of actuality. When there is an absence of this actuality, I'm perceiving a reality which is actually full of disturbances only. This is one of the reasons why this word Maya becomes equal to illusion, etc., etc. Because if you take this forward, it means all my perception of reality is actually illusory. Though the word doesn't mean that at all. So there's a derivative meaning of it. Yeah? And then it talks about what are the vrittis. Yeah? There are 5 kinds of vrittis. Vrittayaha, Panchatayaha. Pramana. Pramana means to have a measure of, which is a correct measure of what is. Okay? Viparyaya. Viparyaya means what I perceive is different from what is. Vikalpa. Vikalpa is perception which is completely imaginary. Yeah? Imaginary. I'll go into some details as we go along. Yeah? Pramana, Viparya, Vikalpa, Nidra. Nidra is sleep, which is an absence of any external movement of the senses. And Smriti is memory. Memory is a recollection. Okay? Memory is described as recollection. Pramana is of 3 types. Pramana is of 3 types. That's the next sutra. Yeah? The first kind of pramana is prati aksha, which means I see in front of me, and the analogy given usually is that I experience reality like the gooseberry in my hand. Yeah? Called hasta amalakam. I can see it completely, I can feel it, I can see the weight of it. I can taste it if I want. So I can actually experience it with all my senses completely. That is pratyaksha. And the only pramana that is accepted in yoga is pramana. Everything else is actually not accepted. Which means if I have to speak, I can only speak of that which I have actually had pratyaksha of. I cannot speak about those things which I don't have pratyaksha of. Yeah? The second pramana is anumanam. Anumanam means by going behind, I can anticipate. Yeah? Inference. So I can see some of it, and then I say, if ABC, then CDE. And this process I've gone through, if ABC, then CDE, actually corresponds to what is there, though I haven't seen it fully. That's why it's called a pramana. Yeah? And the third is called agama. Agama means I listen to words of some person whom I can trust. Why can I trust this person? Because he's somebody called an apta vachana. I've lived with this fellow for 14 years and I know that he lives by what he says. Therefore, I can take his words as provisional and start examining and exploring what he's saying, because it might lead me to reality. Yeah? Now we assume that most of you have come here after this 14 years and trust me as an apta vachana. Yeah? Some of you have seen me for more than 14 years, so I guess it's relevant to say this.